Chair.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair.
How's it, Chair?
Yes, I'm good. How are you?
All right.
Okay.
I have been up since 8.
Yes.
I've been in the meeting since 8. Yay.
Yo, it's a long day.
Long day, long day. Hey.
Long day.
DG is also connected.
Oh, okay.
He's leading the
I
delegation.
suggest that okay. I suggest that we start because I saw the report is too long. I think it's about 71 page slides, if I'm not mistaken. It's going to take us a lot of time to be taken through. Let me formally open the meeting and welcome honorable members. I know it's been a long day coming from the plenary session. That started at 10. I know other members also attended.
Okay, because Lena Yangi Boni.
Yes, yeah, can you please mute?
For some reason, Lena,
yeah, Gogo.
Sound. Okay.
Yeah, Gogo, can you please mute? So, unfortunately, we have to wait for the plenary session to end. We just estimated that it would end before 4:30. So that's why we're only starting now formally with the meeting. Let me also welcome the acting DG. I have been informed by the committee secretary that we will be joined by Deputy Minister Machola. We're told that he's been going for the vaccine. I don't know whether he's in the 18 to 34 group. So he will join us as soon as he's done with the vaccination. But in the meantime, the acting DG is leading the delegation. The minister, the time for the meeting is clashing with his other commitment, and as well as the other deputy minister, Gina. That's information that we received. But I'll allow the DG to come in at a later stage and then also introduce the delegation. Can we then get if there are any apologies?
Good. Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon to everyone. In attendance, Chair, we have Honorable Bosho, we have Honorable Apleni, we have Honorable Lond, we have Honorable Grottersen. With the apologies, we have a standing apology for Mr. Lensman. We also received apologies from the minister and the 2 deputy ministers. I'm sorry, I forwarded you an updated attendance register from the department. Maybe you didn't see it. Both DMs are not coming. Thanks, Chair.
It's disappointing now if that is the case, if none of the executive members. I mean, we raised this before we even wrote a letter to the minister and there was an apology, but now it's disappointing if none of the executive members are not attending this meeting. I know there was a portfolio committee this morning. All 3 of them were part of the meeting, but now it's because it's the NCOP. I have a feeling that this committee is being undermined because the minister and the 2 deputy ministers were in the portfolio committee this morning, and also together with the leadership of the department administratively, as well as the entities, the 2 entities, IDC, as well as NEF. Now, we really feel that this committee is being undermined. I think it's a matter that I will be taking up with the chairperson of the NCOP, because I'm really not happy. But the second part is that I only saw the report this morning. I've been checking since Saturday with the committee secretaries as to when I will get in the report. She kept on promising that she's interacting with the PLO of the department. I kept on checking my emails until I went to bed last night, only to wake up and saw the presentation. And they were coming now from the plenary session, and we did not have a chance to even look at the report. So those are the 2 issues I think I would be raising with the chairperson of the NCOP. So for now, I'll ask then the acting DG to introduce the delegation and also take us through the report. Over to you, DG.
Thank you very much, Acting Chair. Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Malebo Mavije Thompson, the Acting Director General, that's what I meant to say, of the Department of Trade and Industry. And Chair, I must first just humbly apologize that indeed the report was sent yesterday to both the portfolio committee and to this committee as well. It wasn't at the same time. So my apologies for that. Chairperson, I'm joined in the meeting by some of my colleagues, the Deputy Directors General in the DTIC, the leadership of the NEF, and the leadership of the IDC. From the DTIC, I'm joined by Acting DDG of Industrial Finance, Susan Mangole, by Mr. Stephen Hannibal, who is our chief economist, and he is also responsible for our master plan development processes. Tanya van Meeles, she is heading the competition work of the department. Eunice Hussein, who is head of Invest SA, Mautu Molefiani, who is overseeing the work we do on transformation and special economic zones, Lerato Mataboge, who is the DDG responsible for our export program, our CFO, Shabir Khan, and a number of colleagues, Tammy Klassen, also from our program dealing with industrial parks and SEZ, and representing our DDG for trade negotiations is Elizabeth van Rienen. As I indicated, we are also joined by the NEF, and from the National Empowerment Fund is Mr. Rakesh Gareth. He is the chair of NEF, the chair of the board. Ms. Pelisiwe Mtetwa, the CEO of NEF, Slakalani Molapo, who's the divisional head of strategy, Mzini Daimani, General Counsel, Zama Kanyile, acting divisional executive for venture capital and corporate finance, Nhlanhla Nyembe, divisional executive responsible for small, medium enterprises, rural and community development, Ms. Palesa Mzolo, acting strategy and planning manager, and then Mr. Moemisi Mutsipe, corporate communications manager. From the IDC, the delegation is led by the CEO, Mr. TP Chocho. He's joined by Ms. Joanne Bates, who's the Chief Operating Officer, David Jarvis, Divisional Executive responsible for corporate strategy, Tsepo Ramudibe, Head of Corporate Affairs, and Gerald Dinoltana, manager in the office of the CEO. So that is the delegation that is here from the DTIC and the two DFIs that report to the department. The way that the presentation is structured, Chair, is such that I will do some introductory remarks, and then after those introductory remarks, then hand over to the IDC to give a sense to the committee of the work that they've done thus far in response to the crisis, and thereafter the NEF, and then after that the presentation would then be concluded. I heard, Chair, very well that the slides are many, so we will try as far as it is possible in areas where perhaps we repeated ourselves as a matter of emphasis, that we don't do that, so that the committee can have enough time for discussions. Chair, with that, I'll just ask my colleague Tsolo if she could just load the presentation, and I will immediately start.
Grace, can you please give me the rights to broadcast?
I gave you the right, Sulu. Hi, Sulu.
Zulu, are you there?
Sulu. Sulu, I've made you a co-host.
Can someone call Zulu fellow, please? Can go ahead, DG.
Thank you, Chairperson, and once again, good afternoon to the honorable members and to you, Chair, as well. This is the structure of our presentation. We're going to provide the committee members an overview, the DTIC's response and funding, IDC's response and funding, NEF's response and funding in relation to the reconstruction program following the disruptions that we saw in KZN and some parts of Gauteng. Next slide, please. So as members would be well aware that the days between the 9th and the 18th of July were really characterized by widespread unrest and looting and damage to businesses and also other properties, and that damage occurred in KZN, as I indicated, in some parts of Gauteng. That unrest resulted in loss of many lives. It undermined business and consumer confidence, caused very significant damage to property, was coordinated, disrupted supply chains, and caused loss of business to many firms. As part of the response of government to that unfolding situation, the DTIC group developed an integrated response, which included the Department of Small Business Development and other parts of government at national level, at provincial level, particularly the two provinces, KZN and Gauteng, and a number of metros and district municipalities. In the wake of the civil unrest that engulfed the two provinces and some parts of Mpumalanga, within the DTIC, a channel of communication was created between firms and the security services. And members would recall at that time, many of these enterprises would have been taken by surprise. There would have been some level of panic, and because of the relationship that the DTI has with some of the enterprises, in many instances, some of them started calling, be it through our sector desks and the different avenues where they interact with the department in order to see what assistance can be offered. The DTI then set up an email hotline for affected firms so that any reports could then be forwarded to the security services in a coordinated way. We held virtual meetings with firms that were affected, with business associations, in order to mobilize efforts to counter the threats to persons and property. We've worked with the rest of government to reopen the N1 artery between Gauteng and KZN, and also the important infrastructure in the way the economy works, which is the ports, make sure that the ports do open safely, and that there was security to secondary roads, which were also an important and are still an important part of the logistics network that helps our economy operate. We undertook site visits. As a department, the executive, the minister, the deputy ministers also joined, went to different industrial areas, affected businesses, distribution centers, and malls. They met with communities, all the leaders, and they visited affected communities. They addressed meetings, including with the unions, who themselves were very worried about the effect of the unrest to jobs and job security. So those meetings were very important, and in the immediate term, what would the support be for workers who would immediately be displaced because of what was unfolding. We as a department conducted a survey across industries to determine the level of damage and to develop appropriate support measures to assist companies. So in that week, really as the things, everything was unfolding, it was a two-track process of trying to make sure that any information that is available can be forwarded to the security services, but also to form a picture of what then in terms of the response to government, so that we prepare, at least as a department, an appropriate support package to assist affected companies and the workers. So we worked with key supply chains to secure the flow of food and medicine and to enable retailers to restock their distribution centers and stores. And we had to also be engaging with neighboring countries who were facing a real potential of disruption of flow of goods into their countries, based on the fact that for most of our neighboring countries who are landlocked, the Durban harbour is quite key in terms of them receiving goods and of course those goods being transmitted to those countries. We identified alternative suppliers within the KZN-based factories which were damaged. We supported companies to unblock challenges to get production and distribution networks working again. And we developed an economic recovery fund with 3.7 billion that was earmarked and announced by the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. We developed a broader 38 billion package, which was actually done mainly under the leadership of Treasury and the presidency. And the work of that package was not only to deal with the circumstances facing businesses, but also to deal with the social effects that would then come from the unrest and all those other effects that we were already dealing with in relation to COVID. We supported efforts with food, medical supplies to communities in distress, and this was done in the main through a Solidarity Fund and various others. We mobilized support from private sector for SMMEs. We collated data from business groups and undertook economic modeling of the impact of the looting and damage, as well as the relief package that would be appropriate to respond to the extent of damage that the economy was now facing. We also, from a competition perspective, had to consider exemptions to the Competition Act that would allow a lot more coordination among businesses in order to ensure that inputs, essential goods, medicines, and important food supplies were secured, and that was done through publication of a gazette which provided for that exemption. We published a special rebate facility that enabled manufacturers whose businesses were damaged to import free of duty those goods not available locally, subject to commitments on rebuilding their businesses locally. And we also engaged with international investors, providing assurances that they required on security of the economy of the localities in question, and also the safety of the personnel during that time. The DTIC group drew on multiple sources to try and quantify the damage. As I had indicated, Chair, it was a two-track process. The first process of ensuring that we are working with the security services to support stability, but then on the other hand, also equally looking at how we would understand the extent of the damage so that we will be able to put appropriate response measures in place. One of the measures that we put in place was a self-reporting survey of businesses. This was done by the DTIC. We requested the support of the IDC, of the NEF, of different municipalities, different provincial governments, to make sure that the survey is responded to as widely as possible so that we can have a clearer picture arising out of that survey. But we also were keeping a track of what was happening in other industries. The SA Property Owners Association, as an example, they also ran their own survey. The projections were also done by the South African Council of Shopping Centers. The estimates, while they provide different results, I think were helping us to understand the different scenarios that we were looking at in trying to actually quantify the damage. Next slide. From the survey that was managed by the DTIC, we received over 1,000 responses, and this survey, as you can see, that we started with it on the 18th of July, and it was still raw for many companies. The damage at that point was perhaps also too early to assess, but even at that point, there were companies that were able to say, not only this is the level of damage, but this is how long we think it will take us to get back to full production and normalize our business situation. That was very important to us because we had to also make an assessment of how long people will be out of work as companies were gearing themselves up to go back to full production. 991 businesses were reported themselves as being impacted. 5.8 billion was the estimated cost that they had indicated, and they also indicated a potential loss in terms of orders that they had to service. They estimated that to be at 22.8 billion, with a potential of 10,373 jobs being lost. Most of the respondents were in the manufacturing sector, they were in the retail services, and they were in general services as well. Next slide. The respondents were particularly from KZN and Gauteng as well at 26%. What we were also interested in as part of the answering of that big question on how quickly businesses can get back on track was the scale of the uninsured. And from the report that we were receiving at that point, it was 43% of businesses saying they have insurance, while about 57% did indicate that they didn't have any insurance, and they would need support. Next slide. And here we just showing in terms of the survey based on the reported addresses of the respondents, where some of
recording in progress,
where some of the enterprises are located, and the different districts from which they come. And if you see, particularly in KZN, it was both in the urban and the very rural districts where we saw a lot of damage to property and to enterprises. Next slide. So SAPOA, as I indicated, they also did their own survey. In their own survey, they're looking mainly at retailers, and 1,787 retail stores were reported as damaged. And with those that were damaged were also delivery trucks, which were damaged, stock that was looted. And there was also a damage to infrastructure. A number of important services in the economy also disrupted, like pharmacies that were disrupted, ATMs which were said to have been destroyed, and as I indicated, a number of retail stores both looted and in other ways affected by the unrest. Next slide. And then from the SACSC, their survey was talking about potential retail stores that were affected. They were putting it at 3,888. They also picked up on the unrest in Mpumalanga, although to a slightly less degree than what we would have seen in Gauteng and in KZN. So they were able to also pick up on that damage as well. And the focus of this survey was on the shopping centers themselves. Next slide. These are just the pictures for the members, and I'm sure members would have been following the developments and have had further engagements on the development. Here is a clothing factory in Isitebe, which was badly damaged, the retail store in KZN. Also badly damaged, and this is in KZN and Gauteng. This one is in Pinetown, also badly affected. And as you can see in the main, where there was extensive damage, that was closely linked to arson as well. Next slide. Next slide, Sulu. This slide just shares with the members the site visits that were conducted between the ministers, the deputy ministers, the department, different parts of the department, the NEF and the IDC, and the purpose of this was really to get more detail and get feedback from the affected businesses and to gain practical insights on what the relief should look like. Next slide. From the production side of the economy, the impact, of course, was temporary, although it was significant. And what we are sharing with the members there is in terms of productive activities, the type of services that were disrupted. You would see there, although in the DTIC survey, we didn't really pick up on the farming activities, there was some disruption also to the farming activities. I'll talk to that in a slide that follows. And then a lot of disruption around transportation and logistics. Next slide. Next slide. And on the expenditure side, of course, that is why we were also worried about how soon can firms get back on track again, because if firms are not back on track, then incomes are put on risk, and then of course there isn't that spending that we would want to ordinarily have in the economy. So there was that effect that also took place, potential job losses that would arise from this, access to retail infrastructure in affected areas. So people couldn't shop, they couldn't get the necessities that under normal circumstances they would be able to secure. And of course, that thing shakes confidence, not just of investors, but also of consumers. And the investor confidence as well was dented. Hence I indicated in the previous slide, the work that had to be done to provide reassurance to investors of the current state of affairs, the work that government is doing to stabilize the situation, and the rebuilding that would soon follow to make sure that there is a recovery that is well managed. Next slide. So as I indicated, the damage was not only in manufacturing and retail, there was also in agriculture, and the example that we would share with the members at this stage is of the 135 farms that suffered extensive economic damage through burning of sugarcane. These small-scale farmers, they supplied 5 mills in KZN, and most of their sugar was rejected due to the damage. And because of that, of course, they've sustained a loss, and there's now an estimation of farm employees whose livelihoods may very well be at risk if nothing is done. And IDC is now working with these farmers to see what relief can be brought to them. Next slide. From the survey that the DTIC undertook, I think the important thing here that I would highlight to members is that we found out, at least from the reports that the different companies were providing to us, that 25% of those companies were saying they would be able to be up and running within a month. This is in areas where perhaps the disturbance was more about what is happening in the rest of the supply chain, about disruptions of maybe transportation for goods. But then we had also those that were saying 5 months to a year, and also those that were saying more than a year. And this is where the worry and the concern was at, that for those, we do need to make sure that we put in place measures that significantly lessens that period as far as it is possible. And I'd indicated already that we were also monitoring the rate of the uninsured and those that were insured, because the uninsured were presenting with a higher risk of people just perhaps walking away from those operations, because they may not be able to have deep enough pockets to rebuild again. And how do we work with those inside in this difficult period? Next slide. Right, so the setback to the economy's post-COVID recovery and its short-term performance was one of the drawbacks of this the crisis. As I indicated, we were looking at it as temporary, but it is also quite serious because of the effects that it had not just on sentiments among customers, businesses, and investors. It also really dented some of the work that we were hoping we are now starting to achieve as the lockdowns are getting eased, and the COVID situation becoming more and more under control, with the vaccination process being in place. Next slide. I'd indicated already that there was a support package that was put together, just maybe to share with the committee the details of the support package, which was developed with the DTIC and National Treasury and the presidency, that principally it supported extension of the social relief program through the distress grant that was now made available to the tune of 26.7 billion, and it also included temporary employee relief scheme, employee relief scheme that amounted to about 5.8 billion, some deferrals to the payee and excise duties, employment tax incentive, which would be made available for another 4 months, 4 billion economic rebuilding package, and this is the package that would now be rolled out by the DTIC group, and with some of the provincial and even local municipalities, with collaboration of the Department of Small Business as well. And as the DTIC and the Department of Small Business, in order to secure this relief package, we also had to reprioritize internally, and those reprioritized funds made part of the 4 billion that the members see there. There were some private sector funds that were mobilized through the Solidarity Fund and through many other funds, some of them looking at temporary food packages and temporary immediate support that is necessary in the rebuilding program, beyond getting businesses back and back as quick as possible, and getting them back in a way that also deals with the bigger national priorities. Next slide. I think this slide for members, it just indicates the revised growth projections. And as you can see there, that for the Reserve Bank, they are still targeting a growth rate of 4.2, and IDC pegging it at almost 3.9. And these are forecasts that were done prior to the unrest. And we were also looking at this in order to understand the effect of this unrest on GDP going forward. Next slide. So I've spoken to the fact that the DTIC had to reprioritize. That reprioritization happened in the department, but we also requested our IDC and NEF to do the same in terms of funding that they have available, so that we can have a sizable package to offer to these enterprises that were disrupted through an event that was beyond their control. This package has allowed us to now be able to offer blended products, to now set aside grants, to set aside loans, and possibly bridging finance to be able to support those enterprises that may be insured. But of course, the insurer, in this case Sasria, will take a bit of time before concluding the claims, and in that interim period, in that period, that we assist the enterprises to come back to business as soon as it is possible. So these are some of the examples of the types of risks that we've had to manage, and we continue to manage through this process. We've had to review our processes of reaching out to clients, making sure that we don't have a pipeline that is not representative of the extent of damage that we are faced with as an economy, that we fast-track the pace of approvals, reduce red tape as far as it is possible, and here differentiating between red tape and proper prudence, that reduction of red tape is not necessarily recklessness. It is us reviewing the approval processes, making sure that the applications and the businesses that are supported based on a proper business case, but not in a way that tends to delay, and it tends to also not take into account some of the unique circumstances that an event of this nature would bring. An example Minister made this morning was in instances, for example, where a company has burned down and critical papers may be missing, that we find a way to still support that company using alternative processes that would help us to come to a decision fairly quickly to provide that support that a company needs. He made an example of a company that would have lost their documents. Ordinarily, maybe a 5-year plan could be a requirement in order to receive support. That in instances like that, whether we shouldn't be looking at other relative processes to help get those businesses up and going as far as possible. And of course, when you have situations like this, you'll always have those people that believe they can now find a way to profit out of the system. So dealing with the potential for corruption and fraudulent claims, reducing the risks of double dipping, hence the extent of relationship that has now been built, a network of relationships that has now been built to minimize that as far as possible. Within the DTIC stable, making sure that we all know what IDC is looking at, what NEF is looking at, both institutions locked into the system of SASRIA to understand what insurances people have, if those companies do have insurance, so that we minimize any untoward behavior, as all hands are on deck to rebuild the economy and do so in a much better way. Of course, there are limited resources, and we need to find a way that those limited resources are spread as far as it is possible. And how do we also work with companies, providing non-financial support to help them once again to get back into business as quick as possible, so that people are back at work in the shortest possible time. Next slide. All right, so this slide provides the status of some of the applications that both the NEF and the IDC are currently looking, they're currently considering. There are some of the applications that have already been approved to the tune of 262 million, and we've got applications to the tune of 667 million still under due diligence, and dealing with inquiries of about 1.5 billion. And in all this work, the priority, as I indicated, is to ensure that those businesses come back to business as quick as possible. We save the jobs as far as it is possible, and we do so in a way that doesn't put the enterprise's chances of survival at further risk. There's work that is also being done with NASASA, that's the National Stockpile Association of South Africa, who also own a network of enterprises that were disrupted during the events that took place in Gauteng, in KZN and some parts of Gauteng. So there are a number of partnerships, as I indicated, including with the provincial government of Gauteng through the Propeller Fund, where we are spreading our net as wide as possible to make sure that as many enterprises receive the support as it is possible. Next slide. So in terms of some key observations, the important issue here, I think, for the members to note is that the DTIC and the development finance institutions here, we are all under instruction to move with speed, to make sure that we assist these enterprises that were set back by the events that took place, and that we work with these enterprises in a way that is not our normal way that we would ordinarily work. For example, we took the results of the survey that we had received. It was shared with the DFIs. We were making follow-ups to these enterprises, as opposed to perhaps the ordinary way of working, where we would publish our guidelines, we will publish the support, and the enterprises would have to come back to the different institutions to seek support. So the first phase of the work was to ensure that there was an understanding of the scale and the scope of the challenge at hand. And that was coupled with making sure that there is a financial package that is developed. And we did that within the first 2 weeks of the unrest. Now, the second phase is this phase of ensuring that we are not doing business as usual. We use this crisis that has befallen us to also now experiment with new ways, new and nimble ways of dealing with applications. Of course, we're not going to limit this to this process. It's a learning process that some of these will then now become our new normal as we take the process forward, and as we are supporting industries or companies across South Africa, not just those in KZN and some parts of Gauteng. Next. And the phase 4 here will be just to ensure that we are supporting the right enterprises, supporting them with the right mix of loan and grant funding. There are those that, as I indicated, we don't want the support to push them further into indebtedness, such that that actually kills their ability or even prospects of growth. We would want to use this opportunity to help them rebuild, and to rebuild better, and to make sure that in their rebuilding, certain of the issues that were picked up as some of the concerns that some communities may have had, they're also dealt with. Hence, when we issue the support, we are going to to enforce the issues of jobs. We're going to look at the opportunities of local procurement, opportunities to work with local communities in the manner in which the business does its work. When communities feel they are an important stakeholder of an enterprise, they are less likely to burn that enterprise. And this is our mode of working now, to say, how do we build back in a way that gives a certain level of assurance that whatever the circumstances that may have allowed the extent of the damage to ensue, that those circumstances are dampened such that we are not building in preparation for a second wave of this nature. That's why we are saying amongst ourselves, we do need to build back, and to do that much better than perhaps what has been the status quo. Next. I think I've mentioned some of these issues, the importance of building a more inclusive economy, that we need to scale up and speed up the work that we are doing to get companies back in business as soon as possible, the working with local communities, working also with informal businesses, although of course this is the core mandate of the Department of Small Business Development, and the DTIC is not overlooking those enterprises. We're finding ways to work with the department to make sure that informal businesses are not left behind, but as far as it's possible, we are now locking them in to the ecosystems of the larger businesses. Law and order, as I had indicated, was the first concern of investors, of business owners, and without law and order, it really is impossible for us to be able to rebuild sustainably. So law and order remains an important part of building confidence and of nurturing investment. The DTIC is not in the security cluster, but this is the message that we are sending. And as we had indicated, even in setting up a system to be able to report to law enforcement agencies, we were playing our part to ensure that law and order does reign, and we are able to start with the rebuilding process as quickly as possible. Next slide. Okay, I'll just quickly deal with some of these issues, which I have already dealt with somewhat, just to indicate to the members that in order to supplement our ordinary way of working with investors, we've now had to, all of us here, the DTIC and its agencies, had to create a portal where we can deal specifically with companies that were affected and assist them in the recovery process. And just from the DTIC, we had about 183 inquiries that were sent to our DTI recovery portal, and we also have been working with our sister agencies, with the different departments in government, the different spheres of government, through a number of webinars. I think the latest of which was held on the 20th of August, which was attended by over 1,500 people. So we are expanding our reach in terms of ensuring that every member of the public understands the work that we are doing. They understand the support that is available to them. They understand how it is that they can access that support. Next slide, please. Then with Invest SA, I'm sure members would know that this is the part of the department where we do unblocking, where, for example, it will be an enterprise that wants to set up. There may be regulatory challenges within their process. They would ordinarily come to Invest SA, and again in this crisis, Invest SA was out there talking to a number of companies. We've just here set out about 60 companies that we had engaged with through this process. We engaged with different companies, different stakeholders, but for this crisis, it was around over 60 companies. You'd see there that we've singled out some of the big companies. This is not to say that we did not deal with any of the smaller companies, the distribution centers. It's just to highlight the extent of our engagement, particularly with those people that hold a large order book, without which it's very difficult to even support smaller players. And we've just set out to the members, for the members, the activities that we had undertaken through Invest SA, and they range from having to support enterprises that were looted and damaged, and assisting with these enterprises to come back into full production as quickly as possible. United Pharmaceutical Distributors in Pinetown, just as one of those, is now fully operational with their 116 staff members now back at work. Next slide. I've already spoken to this slide, Chair, so I will not repeat it again, just highlighting the fact that even within the DTIC stable, we all had to reprioritize funding, and then we received funding from National Treasury. We developed new relationships, including with Sasria, who we hardly ever work with, but their mandate came to the fore because they ordinarily would ensure the enterprises in state of uprising, where there are riots and all of that. Because of that, we've had to now develop a very close relationship with them, and we continue to work very closely with National Treasury, and in our roadshows, we are working with the Unemployment Insurance Fund to make sure that the workers also know where to receive support and what they are eligible for during this period. Next slide. The response package would include rebuilding of infrastructure. It's going to include working capital, and also re-equipping the enterprises to be more competitive and to be at a state where they can continue their operations as quick as it's possible. So here we're just highlighting the critical infrastructure reconstruction program of the DTIC. Here the focus is on the buildings, making sure that those buildings that were utterly gutted, which were burned, are brought into operation or into a proper place where companies can operate as quickly as it's possible. Isitebe, we're working with Matateni. Members would know that these are industrial parks and that they were heavily hit through the crisis, where we need to find alternative buildings for some of the companies. That's what we are working with the relevant authorities in KZN to do, and to make sure that the buildings are habitable for the companies, and they allow the companies to operate. I had already indicated that we are working with SASRIA, and now we've extended that even in the space of infrastructure rebuild to make sure that this infrastructure is rebuilt to the required standard, and we get the businesses back at work. With this, Chair, I'm going to then ask the CEO of the IDC to then take the committee through the work that the IDC has done, and also after him immediately ask the CEO of NEF to do the same, and I'll just come in after the CEO of NEF has provided the outline of the work that NEF would have done. So Chair, through you, if I may just ask CEO of IDC, Mr. TP Chocho, to then take the committee through the work that the IDC has done to support the recovery. Thank you.
Thank you. It's okay.
Chairperson, thank you, and greetings to you, Chairperson of committee, and all the honorable members. And with your permission, just to assist me with bandwidth, now that I have shown my face, I will just switch off the camera. And Chairperson, I will very, very swiftly go through the presentation. Hopefully I don't lose substance in the process. So this first slide, Chairperson, it says that when the events unfolded, the unfortunate events of the unrest, we followed that up immediately with an impact assessment process. We wanted to know how the clients of the IDC are being impacted or have been impacted by those events. So we did a survey work, and we will show in the next slide the results of that survey in order to get a feel of what was going on. The second important thing to mention, Chair, is that in consultation with the stakeholders, including all the members of the DTIC family entities, we then used this data to refine our thinking, to inform our thinking with regards to the design of this support package that we are discussing today. Next slide, Chairperson, shows a little bit of detail, and I don't really have to go through the stats. Safe to say that we surveyed a population of just over 283 clients, both in KZN and in Gauteng areas. And there was a good response, and we established that quite a number of them were affected directly and indirectly. And by directly, we mean, Chair, where the factory or the physical premises of the business were attacked somehow, and stock or equipment and so on was impaired or taken. Indirectly is more the disruption of maybe supplies. Supplies couldn't come in, or the disruption of distribution. They couldn't get their product out to go to their customers, or their workers could not come to work because the area maybe was closed down, or there was violence around and so on. That's what we mean by indirect effects. But be that as it may, we went on further to test appetite to say, if we were to assist you as the IDC, and we are primarily a loan provider, we lend money, what would be your appetite for loans? And so there were varying responses, but there was a lot of preference to say, no, because we are your clients, maybe you can help us also by deferring our payment. When we are supposed to pay you next month or next quarter, perhaps you can defer that, push it out to next year, or things like those. And so those were useful insights. The sectors that were affected are really across the board: chemical industries and textile companies, mainly in KZN, but also companies that are involved in the manufacturing of wood and machinery equipment and so on and so on. So the graph on the right-hand side just shows the rand values of our exposure. In other words, how much money we have invested in those businesses that were impacted. And we tried to split it on a province by province basis just to show the impacts. The reason why Gauteng has a bigger blue graph is simply because in the portfolio of the IDC, there is more exposure in the Gauteng province as the main economy. That's a function of our rand value exposures. The next slide, Chairperson, we just want to mention here, and not to get lost in the stats there, but just to say in terms of jobs, the first point to mention is that we experienced, or we found out that there was job losses naturally, in a sense of a factory or a business has been destroyed, so people have lost their jobs. They are out, they are gone, and we don't know if they'll ever find their way back. In the second instances, we found what we could characterize as temporary layoffs. So a factory maybe was partially damaged or something like that. So, but the workers have been, some of them, maybe out of 100 workers, half of them have been asked to stay at home and not to come back. So partial sort of temporary layoffs. And then there are instances which are very painful, which are uncertainty, where it is not clear or it is not known to the workers whether they'll be able to resume work because of the effects. And so these are the kind of things that we needed to understand in order to design our assistance package. The next slide, Chairperson, this is just in depth the various sectors of the economy that the IDC serves, where we have seen impacts. We know that the IDC is a very diversified financier in the real economy, financing businesses in agro-processing, the automotive transportation sector, and so on and so on. So based on this survey, we are just showing here that we were really trying to deepen our understanding of where the impacts have been, the severity of those impacts, and so on and so on. So what we saw, as I indicated, disruptions to supply chains, raw material supplies, or the delivery of goods across all these industries. The tourism sector, which has been so severely affected by COVID through the closing of the economy, was even hard hit more by these, because some of the establishments in these areas then saw closures to their operations and their customers couldn't come through. So this is just a matter of detail, Chairperson. In the next slide, this is where we now say, so IDC, working together with the DTIC family of entities, what are you doing? So first, Chairperson, is the 1.4 billion rand that we have set aside at the IDC from our own balance sheet, from our own funds. It is a lending program, it's a loans program, 1.4 billion in total. It is important to mention that it is framed to be concessionary in nature, in a sense of it provides moratoriums for repayment. So in other words, a person can take the money today, but they will only start repaying us in about 12, 18 months' time. Also, we tried to frame the interest rates in such a way that they reflect the situation in terms of being concessionary, cheaper, and so on. Then we set aside 100 million rand as a grant, in other words, not to be paid back, to support township entities, rural, small towns. The majority of these businesses are retail type enterprises and service businesses, that have been affected during this period. And very often all they need is about 200,000 or 1 million rand at the most, or 600,000 and so on, relatively low amounts of money. So in order to restart them and reactivate them, we thought we would allocate 100 million rand for that purpose. And we are doing it through our community development teams at the IDC. In the third instance, we then set aside 10 million rand for CSI, really to support, the rebuilding of schools, where a school maybe as the windows have been damaged or things like that, the furniture was taken out, as well as care facilities and clinics and so on, just the reconstruction of those. And we work with our partner organizations and we allocate money to them, and they then on the coal face, provide this money to beneficiary organizations on the ground. Lastly, we administer 400 million rand from the DTIC under the MSEP program. So in total, the IDC's package, if we look at it, it is 1.4 billion rand plus 100 million, making it 1.5 billion. And then this 10 million rand CSI. And then in addition to that, we administer 400 million rand. So it's about 1.9 billion rand or so that we have as a responsibility to execute to support this recovery program. Next slide, Chair. We are here summarizing the delivery mechanisms. Next slide. Yes, this one. We are here summarizing the operational arrangement. What are we doing practically to deliver this scheme? So the first point there is that we have created this contact points or contact channels through which applicants can come through. The call center, the email system, which is dedicated. So through these channels, people can reach us. But in addition to this already, particularly in Natal, we have our office. We have an office in Durban, at Aquinas. Our officials are walking the streets, they are walking the sites, they are moving from one affected site to the other, driving around in the province in order to reach out to affected businesses. The second point to make, Chairperson, is the dedicated team that we have set aside, a team of 15 professionals led by a manager and a team of executives, including myself, whose job at the moment for the next month or so, and maybe more if required, they have been taken out of their regular jobs. And all they do is to work on this program, on this scheme, to deliver these funds to the community and the businesses that they need. And we have these 4 coordinators who are dedicated to monitoring the portal and the online platforms, so that on an ongoing basis, we are keeping vigilance. And then in addition to that, of course, we are disseminating information through our publicity programs around social media and the press. Next slide, Chairperson. This is the progress that we have made to date since the start, the launch of this scheme. We go through a screening process. We have only approved about 150 million worth of transactions now, and nine transactions, and we will show some examples a little later. We have an additional 9 transactions that are in the due diligence or assessment phase. And because our assessment is a rapid assessment process, we are hoping that we will bring this to conclusion during the course of this week, hopefully taking our numbers in terms of approved values, we hope, to just over 500 million rand. And then, of course, we have those inquiries, about 93 of them as at over the weekend, amounting to 660 million. So there is a sort of decent pipeline of applications amounting to 1.1 billion rand. And so we do need to rapidly evaluate those and hopefully get them approved as soon as we can. The next slide, Chair, and I'm going to go very quickly through these ones. The examples of the companies, or a select few companies that we have assisted thus far. On the next slide is Global Source. It's a company in the clothing and the textile environment. We have granted 30 million rand to this business. As you can see there, 369 jobs that will be restored once this business is back in operations. The second one is Kingsgate. Here, we provided a bridging finance of 10.5 million rand as bridging finance, because this company is going to likely going to get an insurance payout out of Sazria. So while their insurance claim is being processed, we are providing them with a bridge facility of 10 million rand. They have about 180 people who work there. And so it is a good thing to restore those jobs. The next one is a significant player in the clothing and textile industry. They have jobs, 1,279 jobs. We have granted this company 60 million rand. Part of it is from the IDC's own funding, the 1.4, and part of it is from the MSEP that we are administering from the DTIC, the 400 million that I showed earlier on. So it is a longer term funding facility on this trade called Investment Apparel Company. The next one is called Pallet Direct. They produce those wooden items that you see there, members. They employ a small group of young people, 30 or so of them. And so they needed working capital, and we have provided that in the form of a 1 million, just 1 million rand funding to this company. It's really one of those small to medium-sized enterprises. The next one, in the form of a grant. This one is not a loan, it's a grant that we are giving in order to restore this pharmacy in Vosloorus, which is a Black woman-owned business. About 6 jobs will be restored there once the grant has been disbursed. We know pharmacies are really small businesses like that. So just 700,000, making a massive difference to provide and to restock this business and to restore its equipment. The next one is also a grant that we are providing to this company that produces school uniforms. It is a grant of 1.8 million rand, and we will restore those 11 jobs that were impacted there, chairperson and committee members. Again, getting stock back as well as the machinery that they need for production purposes. And then the next one is an important operator, is the National Stockpile Association. They have members. We have given them a grant. Type of funding is a grant of 5 million rand. And so what they then do is that they will distribute that grant to their members in the Stockpile. So maybe one member will receive 100,000, another member 150, and so on, depending on what they need. And so these small operating businesses in the informal economy in the township will progressively be restored back to their life through this grant of 5 million rand distributed through this association. And then Ikwezi, I think is the last one on our slide, is a company, has about 29 people employed, owned by young people. So in order to replace their stock, we have granted them funding of 29 million rand, members of committee chairperson, which then takes us to the end of the IDC's presentation. And those are our contact details. With your permission, Chairperson, I'll hand over back to you and say thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present to this honorable committee. I hand over to you, Chair, to hand over to my colleague, the head of the CEO of the National Empowerment Fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CEO of IDC. Mamon Tet, over to you.
Good evening, Honorable Chairperson Khai and honorable members of the Portfolio Committee. I will not go through all my bullet points or slides because a lot of it have been covered by the DG of the DTIC, the acting DG. So as honorable members are aware, so when the NEF witnessed the spate of civil unrest in the month of July 2021, we have spoken about all the destruction that happened during that period. So what we immediately put in place, Honorable Chairperson and members, was to undertake an assessment of the impact of the unrest on our existing portfolio within the affected areas. So the unrest affected a total 39 NEF funded businesses, accounting for 413 million rands. 13 transactions were severely affected, and these have a combined value of 137 million, and 1,500 jobs have been placed in imminent peril. But the honorable members will be aware that, in fact, if you look not just at the NEF portfolio that I have referred to here, a lot of these businesses would have been businesses that were funded by the NEF in the past, because that is really where the NEF operates, which would be in the rural and township economies. You would also realize that a lot of Black-owned enterprises were actually affected by the unrest. So you'll find that some of the transactions I will be making reference to will be transactions that we had already exited as the NEF, but essentially those would have been transactions that were supported by the NEF in the past. So thankfully, Chairperson and honorable members, only 26 businesses valued at 271 million were interrupted for an average of 5 days and are now back in business. So together these accounted for 1,195 jobs. On the next slide, Chair. So here we're just quickly showing the impact on the NEF portfolio by geography, ownership, and jobs. So of the 39 affected businesses, 23% were owned and managed by Black women, and 59% are located in KZN. 1,195 jobs have been moderately affected, as I have already mentioned. On the next slide. So what we have done, Honorable Chairperson and members, is that the NEF has worked with its existing clients and has ensured that 80% of our affected clients return to full operation within a short space of time. The NEF has also been in contact with over 250 affected businesses from working together with the IDC and the DTIC. And as a responsive organization, honorable members, various NEF teams, as we speak, on the ground across both Gauteng and KZN, in areas as far apart, in far-flung areas like Ixobo, Umkhanyakude, Jozini, Umlazi, Mgungundlovu, KwaMashu, Soweto, and those would be areas that were visited by the honorable members as well. So we just realized as NEF that especially during this difficult period that our, enterprises, are going through and difficult period that we are going through as a country, that we needed to also ensure that there's that physical interaction between ourselves and the companies that were affected. So just over a week ago, we hosted webinars. There was one for Black women-owned enterprises. So this one was attended by 505 women. We did this in partnership with the DTIC. And this past Thursday, together with the DTIC, the NEF also organized a webinar wherein we had property developers. So those would be the people who own most of the malls that were actually looted and damaged. So we had the mall managers, a range of entrepreneurs who were engaged by the DTIC and NEF investment professionals, where we're looking at solutions that we could actually provide in relation to funding of the affected businesses. So the reason why we're targeting the malls, especially in the space that we operate within, is that we realized that as we were funding a lot of these actual businesses, individual businesses inside the malls, that we needed to also now start engaging with the property developers, because you can't afford to support the shops inside the malls if the actual infrastructure itself is not being reconstructed. So that's why we've been having these engagements with the property developers. Honorable members, we will also continue to make the public aware, and in particular affected businesses of the help that they are eligible for. So when we interact with the businesses, when we go to these rural areas and the townships, the property developers and so on, so what we do is that we'll actually go there with a package of information. So we just hand over a package so that there will be no problems experienced from the side of the enterprises in terms of not knowing, which forms and how are they supposed to actually complete those different forms. So it's not as a comprehensive investment report that we would normally look at. We've really tried to streamline our processes so as to try and fast track the process of actually doing these approvals. On the next slide, honorable members, so what we seek to show here is that our teams of investment professionals comprising finance and risk assessment specialists, legal advisors and others have been deployed directly to the trouble spots. So those are all the areas. You'll have the names of the people on the left-hand side, and you can see all those areas that they've been to: Mgungundlovu, the King Cetshwayo region, Ugu, Herigwala, Mkhanyakude, Amajuba, in all of those areas. So if the honorable members require their cell numbers, if, for instance, you happen to get inquiries from any of those places, you are more than welcome to contact us, because we'll give you the names. In fact, you can even keep this information and then just ask for the telephone numbers of the people who happen to be in those areas. So as we speak, we have about 30 of our young investment professionals who are physically on the ground and interacting with these various businesses in the rural areas and in the townships. So the deployment was for an initial 2-week period, but we'll obviously assess the engagement depending on the requirements on the ground. So they will be finishing this project, I think, at the end of the week. But we'll always redeploy them if the need arises. On slide 58, Chairperson, this slide, we are pleased to report that to date, the NEF has approved 18 transactions with a combined value of 112 million. An additional 63 million will be approved, hopefully approved this week, and that will take us to 175 million of approved transactions. We have a further 318 million, which is already at an early assessment stage or due diligence phase, and an additional 900 million. So this 900 million here under leads generated relates to the leads that we're actually getting from the property developers. So that's why you'd have this, high value. We're saying leads generated, but it's actually applications that would be ready to be assessed. That this will be mostly the malls, as I have already highlighted, the malls that were actually damaged during that period. So just to remind the honorable members that the NEF has a huge portfolio within the property sector in South Africa. So we've been doing malls. In fact, some of the malls that were affected were funded by the NEF in the past. We've been doing social housing, we've been doing low-cost housing, and we've been doing a lot of student accommodation. So it was natural for these affected businesses to come to the NEF when they were actually faced with the difficulties that they are actually dealing with. So the total portfolio, property portfolio that we have is estimated at more than 1 billion rands, but that's not the actual value of the businesses that I'm referring to. The total value will be estimated at around 3 billion, because we always co-finance our transactions with our other partners. On the next slide. So I was saying the jobs, if you look at the whole ecosystem involving honorable members, involving the property developers who own the malls, the shops inside the malls, what we are looking at when we're looking at the actual job impact that we are going to have, if we can actually get these into full operation, we're looking at about 13,545 jobs. The next slide, Honorable 59, honorable members. So we're saying that the malls and the industrial parks are a priority focus of the rebuild trajectory, because the infrastructure supports SMMEs to gain entry to the market. So what we are saying here is we will be rebuilding and involved in the reconstruction of all of these businesses. We also want to ensure that we also achieve the other developmental objectives of our government. So for instance, when we look at the whole reconstruction and recovery program, so what we are saying to the property developers is that if you had a mall in Alex here in Johannesburg, or you are part of the Umlazi mega city in KwaZulu Natal, so when we'll be involved in the reconstruction of these facilities, we want to ensure that they will also look at the opportunity now, firstly, of employing the local people as part of the reconstruction program. And we are also looking at how they are going to source their products that they will be using in that reconstruction and recovery program. So you can think about the possibility of using Black-owned construction companies. You could also look at the possibility of sourcing some of their products from Black women-owned or just women-owned, regardless of color, and some Black-owned companies. So we're not saying that white-owned companies should not benefit, but we're saying that since all of these things happened in the townships, let's make sure that as we'll be doing this work, that the local people and the communities, local communities, will also benefit. So slide 60, honorable members, it talks about our criteria to access the NEF funding. So critical among these is our commitment to support any business that has been adversely affected in all sectors of the economy. But obviously, if we're dealing with white-owned businesses, we believe that this will be an ideal opportunity for those businesses to also transform. So if they are willing to transform, the NEF obviously will be an ideal partner for them. So the businesses obviously must be located in Gauteng or KwaZulu Natal. The applicant must also show that the business is not covered by insurance or there is an insurance shortfall component. The beneficiary must be a registered company. And I mean, this is just some of the laws that apply to all our other investments that we have done in the past. Of importance, honorable members, the applicant must demonstrate that jobs lost during the unrest will be restored or increased within 12 months of funding, because we're really putting a lot of emphasis on job creation or job preservation or maintenance, given the current situation that we find ourselves in as a country. I was just looking at the unemployment statistics that were announced a few weeks ago. So where a business is in short, funding can be provided as bridging finance against the cession by the insurance company. And then we look at a maximum of 10 million rand, even though we can always top this up with funds from our different partners, because we have a lot of other partners that we have been working with in the past. Obviously, the loan facility funding will be priced at 0% interest. Slide 61, and to get this work off the ground, honorable members, the DTIC facilitated engagements with SASTRIA and other partners, and I won't go through everything else on this business because I think the DG has already covered most of it. Slide 62. The table on the slide shows the database as at 18 August 2021. Our investment professionals have been calling the clients from the database shared by the DTIC to inform businesses about the Economic Recovery Fund. If you look at our pipeline, we're currently as NEF sitting on 1.4 billion rands worth of investments that we have looked at. Some have been approved and others will be sitting at due diligence. So the minister and the DG were saying they will guide us just in terms of how we need to proceed going forward, because it looks like we would have already depleted most of the funds that we have at our disposal. But as we said to the minister and the DG, that would be very happy to collaborate and work with the IDC and other DFIs like CIFA to see how we can actually come up with a collaborative effort insofar as providing support to these companies is concerned. Slide 63. So, honorable members, it also gives us pleasure to report that the NEF team assisted in the recruitment of 65 unemployed graduates who possess various qualifications. So these are the graduates that will be funding through the funds that we're getting directly from the sitters. So you'll find that you have a lot of graduates who are sitting at home in South Africa. I mean, if you look at the 65 that I've referred to here, these are BCom graduates, engineers, because of what has happened, to the construction industry here at home. So we're working with them. We have a lot of other funds under management that the NEF, has been managing on behalf of other partners. So this is where we have actually employed the graduates that I'm referring to here. So 63% of the recruits are women and 37% are males. So some of these students are the ones who will be also assisting, because what we decided to do as NEF, when we're negotiating with the property owners, we're also saying to the property owners that maybe this is the best opportunity for them to find ways in which they could also cater for the informal informal businesses. So because you'll find that a lot of informal businesses will be operating around the malls, but the conditions under which they've been operating are not looking good at all. So we're saying we'll be doing all of this work in partnership with a lot of other DFIs. Slide 64. So this takes us to the investments that have been approved by the NEF. Is for your bedtime reading, but just quickly, this one here is in food processing sector, is 100% Black women owned and operated business. The business is located in Alexander Township in Johannesburg, and it actually employs about 60 people. The property was vandalized here, honorable members, and looted. So the NEF has provided 18 million rands to this business to actually support the jobs that it already had before it was hit by the riots. The next slide. It's a business that is in the services sector. It's 100% Black women owned. So here the NEF has provided 19 million rands, which will allow this business to re-employ 65 employees that are sitting at home as we speak. But the business, if you look at all the 80 branches that it has in and around KwaZulu Natal, it actually employs more than 1,000 employees. The next slide, KPML Group, it's in the retail sector, is majority Black women owned and managed. It employs over 1,000 employees, 14 outlets of 30 under the group were not spared complete ruin through acts of looting and vandalism, which affected 580 jobs. We have provided 10 million rand for the resuscitation and restoration of the branches of this particular business. The next one, slide 66, is in the fuel retail sector. It's also 100% Black women owned. It has 42 employees. Here, our colleagues, honorable members, found a devastating site of the dated facility with fixtures, including electrical and the IT system that was looted. The wet stock in the forecourt area was contaminated through efforts to source fuel, which has been alleged to be for the purpose of bombing other sites too. So it was very painful to watch. With contaminated wet stock, no shop fitting and no dry stock, our client advised all employees to tend to the UIF. So 6 million has been approved for this client. The next one is SA Paint Distributors, also 100% Black owned. We have provided 6 million rand to this company. Slide 67 is Aquinas Enterprises. It operates within the hospitality industry. It's wholly Black women owned. It's located at Esikaleni Plaza Shopping Center in Eskhawini Township in KZN. It has 15 employees. The next one is Spark Port Group. The Spark Port Group is one of the first Black-owned independent community pharmacy group that has been in existence for almost 38 years now. It's in KZN in Durban. We have approved 5 million rands for this company to support 42 jobs. The last one is Liguguletu, which is 100% Black women owned company. We have provided 4 million rand for the retention of the 42 permanent jobs that we're looking at. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable members.
Thank you very much, CEO. And I don't know if DG, you want to say anything before I ask members to ask questions?
No, just in the interest of time, Chairperson, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to present to the committee. the work that we have been doing to support the reconstruction process in KZN and parts of Gauteng post the crisis that we went through. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Let me thank you and thank the CEO of IDC and the CEO of NEF for the presentation. If we had a control, we could have had a joint meeting with the portfolio committee so that you could have had a joint presentation. I know it might be frustrating to all three of you that you saying the same thing that you were saying this morning. But we, as a committee, also don't have a control of the program of the NCOP. Had we had the control, we could have had it as a joint committee meeting. So I'm sure in your minds you're thinking, why are you doing the same thing on the same day? Are these members not coordinating properly? But I must indicate upfront that it's out of our control. Honorable members, can we have questions, if any? Can I take hands? Honorable Kwashof, Honorable Moima, are there any other hands? Oh, let's take two for now. Honorable Kwashof, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all the presenters. It's just very difficult having to listen and not having had the time to actually prepare, so please bear with us. If I could address some questions to the acting DG, I'd like to know the N3 artery between Gauteng and KZN. What was the actual cost there? That would entail all the heavy vehicles that were burned and then the foodstuffs, etc., that went to waste. And then I'd also like to know from the acting DG whether you've done any study to see what the citrus industry lost, because I had very many calls from people in Mpumalanga or businesses in Mpumalanga and Limpopo that were transporting citrus down to the harbour in Durban, who either had their vehicles burned, so that's a loss of products, as well as being told, turn around and take your fruit to the harbour in the Eastern Cape. I'd also like to know from the acting DG municipalities, any engagement with them regarding special rebates, and the acting DG spoke about having had discussions with the international markets. If she could just give us an indication on whether the international market is still as eager to invest in South Africa as they were prior to the riots. Chair, if you remember, when we had the discussions with Sasria, we asked them if they would not engage more openly with more, especially our informal traders, because they were not aware of the possibility of getting insurance at these low rates. And I would therefore also like to ask the acting DG if engagements have taken place with our informal traders to explain to them that there is insurance available for them as well. And then just a comment, these unrests have led to not only losses for businesses and traders, but the whole country must take into cognizance that our consumers, many of them come from the impoverished households, are unable to now carry the increases in prices, and this is going to add a burden to the state because everything has gone up since these riots and unrests have taken place. The acting DG also spoke about up and running businesses that will be up and running within a month. Are these more the corporate businesses or are these also SMMEs? She spoke of the anti-corruption hotlines. I'd like to know whether anti-corruption programs are in place to ensure that corruption does not take place within the department that we saw with the UIF. And then she must explain to me how the state or the government is going to reduce the red tape. And then to the IDC, I see you spoke of the Cipla MedPro that was damaged and was not able to produce any antiretroviral. Are you able to give this committee or this house an indication of how many people's antiretroviral was paused and what effect that will have on them? Then still the IDC, 50% of workers that are at home. These 50% of workers, are they at home with pay or without any salary? Is assistance being given to them to be able to apply for UIF? And then focusing on assistance, will this be more urbanized businesses or will the most rural areas also be assisted? Because we saw many and heard many heart-rearing stories of people that have absolutely nowhere to go. And then to the NEF, your package that you're going to hand over, are you sure that this package is user-friendly? Because not everybody is on the same page as you and I are. Then I would like to know what happens if an applicant that has been given a loan cannot restore or increase jobs within the 12-month period of the loan that's been given to him? And then what happens if a business that is not able to become viable again? What happens to that loan if he says to you, I'm sorry, I've got this loan of 15 million, but I am unable to take this business forward? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Boshoff. Honorable Moima.
Thank you, Chair. Let me also welcome the presentation that's led by the DG and the team from the IDC and NEF. To Chair, the first point that I want to check from the DG is the effect of this unrest, probably in terms of our economy, in terms of their own analysis, but also from the little information that we have. I suspect the effect of this choke in terms of our supply chain will be felt definitely in terms of our economic growth. And I just want to get a sense from them as to whether should we expect the worst in terms of the economic contraction in the third quarter. Like I indicated, because obviously with what happened, disruption in the supply chain took place, and a number of areas were affected, which obviously had an effect in terms of the delays of the fresh produce exports. So, and as a result thereof, I think one is fearing for the West in terms of what to expect in the third quarter. So I just want to check whether is my concern understandable, what is there and what is the anticipation. The second point relates to the point that was raised around the attack on the malls in the township. The attacks on the mall in the township. I suspect we might need to have a sense in terms of the profiles of those property owners in the mall. Whether have they done that? The reason why I'm raising this point, Chair, is because the shopping mall definitely they are adding value to our communities in which they operate, and not just only in terms of employment, but also in terms of access to markets and reduced market competition, but also it contributes to mitigating the effect of the spatial pattern of our country, that we have said that it is one of those elements of the structural constraint that has to be addressed. So I'm more interested to get a sense as to whether have they done that profile, and what is it that we can do, because you see the narrative that these property malls are not part of our communities. I think it's a problematic narration, because it gives credence to attack or the looting that took place. And therefore it becomes important that we get that profile. But more than that, the fact that this malls, like as we saw when we were in Orange Farm, the most of those occupants and the owners of the property itself were Black people. Of course, there's another element to that I want to raise, because what is quite clear is that some of these incentives are only eligible to South Africans. So in Orange Farm, the victims of the looting, the property owners, are not South African. What is the policy of the department with regard to mitigating the impact? Because as it is quite clear, it looks like there is a loophole where foreigners will not be helped. So it will be important just to get clarity on that. The other point, Chair, that I thought I must raise relates to, I think, slide 18. Slide 18 that speaks to the period within which this intervention must take place. I think it will be important. It will be important to no, it relates to to certain investment that has to be reconsidered. I needed to get a sense in terms of what does that mean, because slide 18 make a distinction between two areas: reduce household spending, and on the other side is the investment activity affected. And then it says certain investment plans postponed or reconsidered. If one can just get a clarity in terms of what does it entail, because it was a bit not clear in terms of what are the details of that, so that at least one get a sense as to is this an illustration that the investment drive driven by both the minister and the president has been affected? Obviously, lack of security will definitely have an impact in terms of the investors' confidence. So it will be important to get a sense as to where are this investment that has to be reconsidered. Is it in Gauteng or is it in KZN? Because our emphasis, as opposed to National Assembly, has to be specific in terms of localities. But the reason why I'm raising this point is because in terms of the malls in Gauteng, out of 500 malls, only 30 were affected. So therefore it becomes important to get a sense as to where are these investment plans that will be postponed located. And let me pause there, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mwima. Honorable Tim, Protester. Honorable Tim.
Chair, thank you very much. I'm on my phone.
Okay.
I'm having challenges with my laptop. Chair, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I want to thank the presenters for their presentation. Chair, I just want to echo your sentiments that we could have received this presentation earlier, and it would have been very nice to have the ministers present during this presentation, because a number of the questions could have been directly put to the ministers. But anyway, it is what it is. There are just three questions I want to raise, Chair. One of the presenters touched on it, and it concerned me slightly. The violence in KZN, which is my province, so I'm speaking for my province. I don't know the quantum and the issues in Gauteng, unfortunately. I don't know the exact scale of the damage, but I certainly know exactly what happened in my hometown of Durban and small towns all across the province. And the reality is that the violence knew no bounds from a racial point of view, okay? So street traders were looted. Massive stores like Massmart were looted. Street traders and small spaza shops had their shops burnt down. Massive places like, massive stores like Ted's Home Store was burned down. So I think we need to understand that this violence and this looting was indiscriminate, certainly from a racial point of view. It was simply a free-for-all. And so therefore, I would like to just get it on record today that the aid given to those who were the victims of this will also be indiscriminate and will be based solely on those who are worthy of that help. That is the only determination, obviously within the budget that the department has. But it's based solely on that. Colleagues, I don't want to get into the same arguments we had at the start of COVID, but if you're a street trader, you are directly trying to trying to feed your family. If you're the owner of a larger business, like let's say Techie Town, you are employing 30, 40 people. all of that is tied to each other, and they're all absolutely interdependent on each other. And when we start saying that we're going to focus just on township stuff and not the others, we are affecting everyone. Everyone once again becomes a victim. So can we please have an assurance that the help will be indiscriminate? It doesn't matter who you are. If you're lost, if you're a victim, and I really echo Honourable Kenny Moyamang's statements, is what about the foreign nationals? Because foreign nationals also employ a lot of South Africans. And until those businesses get up and running, those fellow South Africans are sitting at home doing nothing and not making money, and their families are going hungry. Can we please have a clear statement on that? Then the next thing I want to touch on is civil claims. Slowly but surely, people are being picked up, they're being arrested, instigators. I want to know whether the department has considered at all the issue of civil claims against these instigators, whether they're actually going to go and sue them for the work that they did that resulted in 50 billion rands worth of damage. Now, I know you're not going to get 50 billion rand out of it, but there should be made a clear marker set down that we will not only go after the instigators and the persons responsible for this criminally, but we'll also go for them civilly as well. They must pay. They cannot get a suspended sentence and walk away. They must also be hit in the pocket for the damage that their instigation caused. So the question there is to the department is what are they considering in that regard? And then finally, for the criminal cases that are ongoing, you saw that Kanyile appeared in court a day or two ago, our friend from Fees Must Fall. The way criminal cases work is evidence is presented, and if the court so finds that the person is guilty at the end of the day, then it goes to mitigation and aggravation. Now, aggravating circumstances will be massively affected by the quantum of the damage. So is the department working with the SAPS to actually help them with the quantum of the damage? So the SAPS aren't just making a thumbsuck assessment of what went down here and a shop was burnt. They also need to know a shop was burnt and so much was lost and so much future revenue was lost, etc., so that the courts fully understand when they adjudicate on these matters what the actual damage was, and not just the fact that a store was burnt down, but what the actual financial damage was to the victims. Thank you, Chair. That's all I have for now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Honourable Tim. Are there any other hands? Oh, okay. If I may also ask, I just want to perhaps just a follow up on the question that was raised by Honourable Moimang, the concern with regard to quarter three, given that in quarter two there has been an increase of 1.8%. Perhaps if the department can just tell us what was the cause of this 1.8% increase, which we believe does not include what happened in the KZN and Gauteng. If we could just get because we expect therefore that quarter three will be affected by what has happened in KZN and Gauteng. The second part, a point that I want to raise, that the DTIC in the presentation, it is said that there's a total of 4 billion that was launched together with the Department of Small Business Development. And then if you go to, I think, slide 24, the package has been broken down as a DTIC reprioritization, which is 700 million, National Treasury allocation 1.3 billion, IDC reprioritization or allocation of 1.5 billion that the CEO talked to, and in fact he broke that down, and the NF allocation of 250 million. So what I would like to find out first, these amounts, how are they then being administered? given that if you go down on slide 26 on the status of the application, you find, if you look, for example, on NEF, the inquiries being considered amount to 900 million, yet it was given, I mean, and I don't know whether in terms of reprioritization, I think 250 million. So if we could get clarity, but also where is this 700 million going, because it's not explained in the presentation, and also the National Treasury allocation is not explained, whether these amounts went to IDC and also NEF. There's no explanation. We just assume that these allocations are just from IDC and NEF are the reprioritization of their own budgets. So therefore, we want to know then there's 1.3 billion from National Treasury and the 700 million from the department. Where have they gone to? So just clarity on that aspect. But also the points that are being raised by honorable members, just also emphasis on my part on the issue, how, to what extent is the investor confidence affected with regard to what has happened in both provinces, and also what are we doing perhaps as government to restore that investor confidence. But also linked to this issue of reprioritization of budgets by both, I mean, by the three, the department, the two entities, which programs have been reprioritized in terms of the programs of the department and the two entities, and to what extent, what is the impact to those programs in terms of the implementation of the plans of those programs. As the Honorable Boshoff was indicating, that we have met with Sasria. They inform us about the work that they do, their mandate, but also and gave us a status of the claims that are likely to be processed. But I hear that the acting DG is indicating that they hardly work with Sasria, but they have resolved now to build a close relationship. But what I want to check, whether especially with the support to businesses, should it therefore be mandatory to the businesses, especially those that are uninsured, that going forward it should be mandatory when the entities and the department gives out monies to businesses to assist? Shouldn't it be mandatory that those businesses should also take up the insurance with Sasria? Because the amounts that we were told by Sasria are very affordable. I think businesses could afford. They are very cheap compared to normal insurances. So I just want to check whether, as you will be having this close relationship, you shouldn't consider therefore making it mandatory to the businesses that you support financially, that this be mandatory. But I also want to check whether are there any offices of departments and of the entities that have been affected by the destruction of the infrastructure, and also how you, if there are any, how are you going to deal with that, given that government buildings are not insured? I'm not sure whether they are insured with Sasria. One of the presentations that we once received from the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure was that government departments are not insured. This was relating to the fire that damaged Parliament roof. I think some months ago, we got to get this information that government buildings are not insured. But also, I understand that also the sugar industry has been affected. To what extent, therefore, the Sugar Master Plan program has been affected in terms of its implementation. The monies that have been allocated by the department, DTIC, and the entities, as well as the National Treasury, what role is it being played by the local government and the provinces, just so that there is some monies from Gauteng, I think it's called the Propeller Fund, if I got it correct. But I didn't hear is to what extent are the other municipalities intervening in terms of the measures in both provinces. I agree with the Honorable Protestant with regard to, because the criteria that is only limited to businesses that are owned by South Africans is not taking into account the fact that those businesses that are owned by foreign nationals employ South Africans. As we're on this oversight visit, particularly in Gauteng, we went to a business mall in the orange farm. And as we're conducting the oversight, we were together with the CEDA officials, where they were also indicating the same criteria that the assistance is only limited to South African owned businesses. So that what therefore are other measures or intervention to assist those foreign national owned businesses, because they employ the South African. It means therefore those South Africans that are working for those businesses and are indirectly are not going to be assisted. But also, given that now the priority in terms of this funding is directed at the two provinces, the businesses that are in these two provinces, to what extent, therefore, are the programs of the department and the two entities going to assist the businesses that are outside the two provinces? Because there could be a view that now the priorities are those two provinces, and the assistance will be at the exclusion of the other provinces. That has to do also with the reprioritization of the budget. Reprioritization affect the assistance that was going to be given to all the businesses throughout the country. I hope that question is clear. In terms of the observation, DG, you talked about law and order, and I thought you were going to perhaps elaborate on that, because my question would be, how do you prevent this situation going forward? What are extra measures in terms of the security of those businesses will be employed going forward, so that we avoid a similar situation? But also in terms of mobilization of resources, there's you also refer to mobilization of resources from the private sector. If you can elaborate on that, what role has the private sector played in terms of the mobilization of resources to assist the businesses that were affected. But as we're also giving us information with regard to the period on which the businesses expect that they will be in operation again. Some of them were saying 5 months to a year, others over a year. And my concern is that if perhaps we could have broken this down, for example, saying shopping malls, it will take them so much time, because some of these shopping malls, the fact that they're not operating now, it has a domino effect on other businesses, especially the informal traders. For instance, informal traders will be around the shopping malls, but if those shopping malls, like we have seen when we visited KwaMashu in KZN, those informal traders were affected. But I don't know if perhaps you could have your survey indicating as to which group of businesses would operate in which period. Yeah. And I just want to go back then to the issue that we have been discussing as a committee when we're getting the briefings in the past that has to do with the slow uptake of the loan guarantee scheme that is administered by the banks. What is their role, particularly now with this situation that the two provinces in particular find themselves, but also the then National Treasury Minister spoke about the swift implementation of economic reforms for the growth and fiscal framework. Can we get an elaboration with regard to these economic reforms that will lead to growth and the financial and fiscal framework? Then another issue that you spoke about was to avoid double dipping. What happened in a situation where the assistance leads to some shortfall for the businesses? Can they be allowed then to double dip, let's say get assistance from IDC and perhaps from CIFA outside the DTIC family, but also maybe from the provinces, from the municipalities? Are they only restricted to go to one port to get assistance? Quite a number of then with regard also to the criteria for those that need to be assisted, what happened in a situation where their records have been destroyed or damaged, in cases where the buildings were destroyed or burned? What happened to those situations? So those are the business development is limiting the industry to 5%. What is the situation with regard to the IDC? Because you also spoke about the rearranging the interest rate, but you didn't come up with a percentage. Thank you very much. If you can have responses, DG and the CEOs.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, for a comprehensive set of questions from the honorable members. I'm going to respond to some of the questions, and I'm going to ask some of my colleagues if there's a need for further details to then provide the detail in the meeting. And of course, CEO of IDC, Mr. TP Chocho, and CEO of NEF are also going to respond to those questions that were directed at the two institutions. Chair, I will start with the questions that came from Honorable Boshoff, making reference to the presentation this morning that was also made by Sasria, who also indicated that this issue of estimation of costs really is a moving target. In the sense that some of these claims are still coming through. So some of the cost estimates, as we would have shown in the different surveys, they are really changing by day, crystallizing as the claims processes are taking place, and it's becoming clearer what the costs are. So at the moment, I won't be able to say, for example, on the issue of the N3, how what was the actual scale of the damage in terms of cost, because that's what Sasria is now looking at for those affected businesses, and they themselves have indicated that as they conclude the claims, these costs become a lot clearer. What we do know is that there would have been a cost. There would have been a cost in terms of the disruption to supply chains, and Honorable Boshoff is absolutely right around even the destruction of vehicles. We're working with our colleagues in Dalred on the impact in the agricultural sector. You saw there that we made the example of sugar, and yes, indeed, the citrus issue was also brought to our attention on two levels. The citrus not being able to enter the port, and in some instances where trucks were stopped even before they could get into KZN, and those the time there that it took. So working with our colleagues in Dalred on that, and this has had an impact on our master plans, and in a way it has helped the master plan morph. Because some of the initial targets that we would have, for example, had for the master plans in the agro sector, be it sugar, and even the other ones that we've had to look at them with industry. Remember, master plans are a product of co-creation with industry, in order to say, with this circumstance, what can we now do better? Minister was in a meeting now in a different sector than these ones that Honorable Boshoff was highlighting as examples, with the clothing and textile master plan, and one of the agreements of the CEO forum that oversees the master plans was that we do need to build back, and we do need to build back better. that certain of the ways in which, say, employment, procurement is done has to take the local context into perspective, bringing the communities much closer to the functioning of the different enterprises, such that they have a stake in the sustainability and the growth of that of those sectors. So these are some of the discussions in the context of master plans that have now started to take place in the wake of this, to morph that process to also focus on the potential to bring more community involvement and to make it more inclusive. So it's no longer just about the big issues we're talking about, which are still very important, the issues of domestic procurement, making sure we are availing markets, particularly from government availing markets to the domestic manufacturers. It's also now them as the manufacturers looking around, availing markets to domestic communities and building that shared ownership, which is quite critical in order to support the project of building back better. And yes, the international partners, there were those that did reach out to the department. Some would have reached out also to DERCO minister.
Sorry, DG.
Yes.
The communication guys from Parliamentary Communication Services are asking if you can put on your camera, because this is live on the social media platform. And the other speakers as well, we will request if they could have their cameras on, please. You can switch on your mic, DG. It's off.
Yes. No, thanks. I was dealing with a new requirement that was saying my connection is unstable as soon as I turned on the camera. So if it does become an issue, I might need to turn it off. But for now, I'll just continue as per request from the chair. Chair, I was just on the issue of the international markets, that indeed, as we had indicated, there were a number of our international partners who had reached out to us, and the minister did take some calls, and even in the meeting this morning had indicated that in one of the calls, it was understood that while these are disturbing events, I think in the context of a democratic country, from time to time, this kind of things do happen. The most important thing is that there is that rule of law, and people can see that there are consequences for such action. And once those assurances were provided, one or two of these companies even made further commitments, not just to continue with the investment that they had in mind, but to further their investments. And this is in the context of companies that are multinationals, that it wouldn't be the first time they would have had to deal with such a situation here in South Africa. It could be the first time in South Africa, but in a number of localities where they operate from time to time, they have to deal with this. And their big requirement is that when such happens, the rule of law has to be seen to be maintained, and where laws have been broken, that there are consequences for that. But it's not entirely not conceivable that in a life of a vibrant democracy, such things would happen. Their issue is that let's make sure that the systems, the infrastructure is there to minimize the risk as far as it is possible. So those engagements engagements have taken place, and they continue to take place. I'll link to a question that the chair also raised. The chair raised the question around the investment drive, whether this has now destabilized that. Our understanding is that we are right on target in as far as investment is concerned. Of course, now this becomes another area where we would have to explain and give assurances, as I'm indicating that we're dealing with an international investor public that is totally aware of some of the situations from the various localities where they operate. The issue now is that we now also have to almost be explaining this, explaining the actions that that government is taking. But we are well within target of that investor drive. When investors do make decisions, they have a longer term horizon than a short-term disturbance. So, depending on the type of investment, while of course these situations do call into question the level of confidence, as long as there's a feeling that things are in place, systems are in place, this thing is being taken care of, and that jointly there's something that can be done about it, then the appetite to continue to invest is there. The issue is that we've had to do these explanations, and we've had to provide the assurances, and that is what the presentation was highlighting. Then on the engagements with informal traders, through the survey, a large number of the enterprises that responded in the survey were small. Were small traders. When we realized that there was a segment that we were missing, in particular the informal sector, we then reached out to the Department of Small Business. Hence, we've been talking about this partnership that we are trying to put together with the Department of Small Business to see how through CIFA we can work together to support informal traders. They already have systems to support informal traders. So the idea is to latch on to those systems so that support can go to informal traders as quickly as it is possible. The Department of Small Business has itself set aside funds. It was, I think, either 300 million or 400 million that they had set aside, which they've started the process of assisting small enterprises, particularly informal traders with, and our interest with them is to see how through the funds that we have received, and in part I'm answering the Honorable Chair's question about what we are going to do about the 1.3 and the 700 million. A part of it would also be to support the informal traders, but through the Department of Small Business, and some of the work that our agencies would be doing. As I was saying that we haven't worked with SASRIA before because of just the type of support that SASRIA offers. They support companies in events of riots, strikes, terrorism, public disorder. So ordinarily, that wouldn't be such a focus as what these events did. And that is why under normal circumstances, when we are supporting enterprises, even when there's been some level of disorder, we won't necessarily need to go to SASRIA. We'll just work with them based on the information that they are providing to us that we can verify. But the scale of this one does require that partnership is bedded down. The fact that there may be bridging financing that is required, a matter that SASRIA had agreed to, that while they are looking at the claims, they could allow a dispensation where any one of our institutions could then step in to support the business to go ahead with their investment, and then there might be a session or whatever the agreement then between the enterprise SASRIA and the relevant agency. But the idea now with bringing SASRIA closer on board was to see how we can stand in the gap, so to say, as the assessments and everything else that SASRIA must do, and that they are doing to minimize that period between the assessment and the disruption and when the enterprise is now fully operational. Then there was a question on the anti-corruption measures that we have put in place. All of us on the call are absolutely committed to make sure that this work that we are doing is done in the public interest. Our processes are fair, and there is no undue influence on the work that each of the institutions are doing. All of us have been in the business of dispersing funds to industry one way or another in support of our master plans or the various priorities, and the systems of combating corruption are built in already in the way that we operate. But in addition to that, the minister has asked that an anti-corruption hotline be put in place, where if such malfeasance takes place, that there's a place where it can be reported. But our institutions already have built in mechanisms to deal with those kind of situations when they do arise. That is why through the PPE, remember we were also dispersing funds to support enterprises through that. There was never anything that came to any of the institutions here. This is by way of providing members the assurance that we are looking at this, and it is something that we will do everything in our power to ensure that it does not actually undermine the work that we are doing. Then on the reduction of red tape, I did see a message from the CEO of IDC that he may need to take leave at 30:30, but this is a matter where perhaps IDC and NEF could quickly just elaborate to the committees what new processes have been put in place to deal with those. Then
can I suggest that DG, maybe we allow him to come in now to respond to the questions that were directed at IDC, and after that, then you can continue.
No problem, Chair.
Thank you very much. CEO?
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you for indulging me in that regard. The first one to talk to would be to say that as far as foreign nationals are concerned, the issue there really is the South African jurisdiction of a company. It's a South African registered company, tax-paying entity in the land, and therefore in that regard there wouldn't be exclusion as far as the industrial development is concerned. We're just confirming South African owned entities. The question second was, which programs have been reprioritized? Perhaps the other programs not adversely impacted in the process. Just to say, as far as the IDC is concerned, we had allocated money for COVID relief last year, which was not wholly utilized, 2 billion, about just over 900 million of it was not committed. That's the one that we have reallocated. However, I do want to restate and emphasize this point that the IDC has an allocation of about 11 billion rand to projects for this year. And so we see no risk that any of the funding programs to various sectors in mining, in infrastructure, in energy, in agriculture, and so on would ever be sacrificed at all. If necessary, and this we do all the time, we would go to our board and seek an additional appropriation in order to meet the economic needs of the nation, the funding needs of enterprises. So there's absolutely no risk of adversely affecting financing programs to any other sectors that we serve. The third question around the sugar industry, Chairperson, our on-the-ground impact assessment through our officials who have been working the length and breadth of the fields in KZN has indeed indicated adverse effects there. So there are about 9 existing customers of ours, clients of ours in that area, and we are working with them, and the immediate actions are, 1, to provide them with relief, to say maybe your working capital facilities should not be paid now, so we give them breathing space. Secondly, we will be looking at working capital support with a moratorium on repayments over the next 12 months or so, so that they recover their production cycles. Chairperson, we are engaging at an industry level as far as the sugar industry is concerned, in order to find a holistic package that we can assist with. And with your permission, Chair, please, we would be happy to report back in writing to this committee, maybe in the next week, about what kind of measures we have designed and packaged arising out of these engagements with industry in the sugar industry. Yes, at a municipal level up to now, our engagements are with the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, driven from the level of the province, the Economic Development Department in the Gauteng province. So I'm sure it is a model that we can very easily replicate in other provinces. Assistance to businesses outside KZN and Gauteng, I think that is a very, very, very well observed point. I particularly I took note of the point that was made that maybe a producer and a supplier based in Limpopo or in Mpumalanga was impacted by way of their logistics system, a truck or whatever getting intercepted somewhere in Natal or something like that. So there is no exclusion. I think what we need to do from ourselves as entities of government is to publicize that, make it very clear that this assistance is not limited to geography. It is limited to businesses that have been affected by the events. A business in another province could have been affected, and therefore, if they need assistance, they could approach us. The next question, quickly, Chair, is the role of the banks. Yes, I'm not speaking directly to that particular guarantee scheme, but the point that I'm making is that in our discussion with the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, we were very clear that we should seek cooperation, partnership with the banks. They have a very comprehensive, massive distribution network of presence at every town, every corner. And we think we can achieve a lot if we work with them on this specific program and seek their assistance. And to that extent, I've already initiated discussions with the Banking Association of South Africa, BASA, the representative body for commercial banks in South Africa. So again, we can send back a note to this committee, maybe in about a week or two's time, regarding how those discussions have panned out. Where records have been damaged, we have to be innovative. Electronic data in the form of a company's bank statements, which are still available at the bank, could very well give us an indication of the status of the company, how it has traded over the past couple of years, and so on and so on. So it shouldn't be a limiting factor, the fact that physical records have been destroyed. The owners of the company can make representations through affidavits and things like that. And so at the IDC, we are running this program supervised by a team of executives. I chair the committees myself, and we look at these things and we say, okay, fine, these are the circumstances, but how can we overcome them and still be able to provide assistance? Indeed, within reason, within a verifiable, auditable framework of assessment and decision making. Interest rates, Chairperson, at the moment, the instrument that we designed is a prime linked instrument, prime +1, we said, but having reconsidered this based on the experiences of the past couple of weeks, we think we need to lower that down. I'm not able to give you a number, Chair, today, because tomorrow we are taking a recommendation to our board of directors, and we need to obtain their permission for a lowered rate, which will effectively mean a subsidy element to our funding program. So apologies that I can't give you a number, but we just need to confirm it with our board yesterday. On trying to overcome red tape, Chair, there are a couple of measures. One, we used to have a committee that sits only once a week. We have agreed and we have already scheduled to sit every day as members of the executive to consider the applications that are coming through, to sift through the problems, if there are any hurdles, to assist the transaction teams. That's one thing. The second thing is the submissions, the reports that are prepared to committees have been lightened, whereas an average report to the IDC Investment Committee would be about 40 pages or with annexures and what have you. We're talking now documents which are like a form, 5-6 pages in length, and can be completed in a matter of a day or two. And we have allocated human capital, about 15 dedicated investment professionals. We have pulled them out of their regular jobs. All they do and all they will be doing over the next 4-6 weeks is to work on this program and nothing else, in order to place emphasis on the delivery on this program. So, Chair, I'm looking at my notes and I've highlighted here, those were the questions that I thought the IDC specifically could respond to. And DG, with your guidance, I have about 2 minutes. If I've missed anything, DG, I'm happy to respond, but these are the ones that I picked up. And Chairperson, I really want to thank you for giving us the opportunity. Very enriching and enlightening engagement and questions that we received here from the members of this wonderful committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CEO. If there are any follow-up questions directed to IDC, then DG will perhaps respond to them, but then also if can't, will be passed to your office, and then you will then respond in writing to them together with those other issues that you're still going to give us the feedback on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can continue, DG.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you also to the CEO of the IDC. Chair, then Honorable Mwima asked about the effects of the 2 weeks on the economy, on GDP, and went on to the slide that was dealing with the income side of GDP, wanting to understand what which companies were we talking about in terms of derailment of investment, or even that investment not taking place at all. So the interesting bit about this crisis and the fact that we are responding to it now, and the timing of it, is that it happened in the middle, so to say, of the quarter, and I think actually more the beginning of the quarter. So it could be that in the wash, when it comes out in the stats, what we may see is just a temporary going up of consumption, of various expenditure, as people are coming, are bringing back their plants to production. There's a restocking that is taking place. So you're likely not going to see a contraction because of the 2 weeks, but rather a spike coming from the expenditure side of GDP. At least that is what the economists are telling us. But it's the long-term effects that we are worried about, the effects that relate to our ability to hold on to productive capacity, which is quite important, and to make sure that we grow our productive capacity. When you're trying to get manufacturers in a locality, unlike maybe some of the industries, there's this need for stability, because some of these sectors, they're not as dynamic in terms of profit. You have to wait a bit long in order to make up the investment that you've put down. So the issue of security, the issue of stability becomes quite important. So in terms of the quarterly results on GDP, mindful that of course between Gauteng and KZN, if you take those two together, they form the largest bulk of economic activity. What we're not anticipating is that we are going to see a big dip in GDP coming out of this. In actual fact, it may very well be the opposite. But if Stephen, our chief economist, also wants to come in to elaborate on that, he's most welcome to do so. Which programs have been prioritized? I think from an IDC perspective, the CEO has spoken to that. Internally in the DTI, the programs that we had initially budgeted for infrastructure and industrial parks, some of those we've had to relook. What it doesn't mean is that we are going to delay support in other provinces. What it perhaps is going to come down to is how do we schedule payments. So as the CEO had said, And it was correctly articulated that we have to be careful that any prioritization doesn't marginalize, so to say, the other provinces in terms of the support that they can receive. That has been something that we've been looking quite hard at to make sure that we don't have that perverse incentive, if I may put it like that. And we have other provinces in a way being deprived of support coming out of such activities. So what we are looking at is most likely just a rescheduling in terms of timing, how certain of the projects could be undertaken, but what we're not looking at is cancellation of the different programs throughout the country as part of the response. We believe if we do that, then we're going to weaken the economy. We would then be undermining the possibility of a growth spur. If we were to just do a restructuring that doesn't take into account activities in the rest of the country. So we are mindful of that, and we thank the honourable member also for highlighting that. Then there was a question on damages to any of our facilities. As far as the DTI is concerned, none of our buildings, none of our infrastructure that is directly owned by the department was destroyed. As we indicated, the industrial parks that we've worked closely with were the ones that are affected. And the indication that we've had from Itala, who owns some of the industrial parks, is that they are insured with SASRIA. Now the work is ensuring that, as again was raised, what happens where there is a shortfall, that if there is a shortfall in the rebuild process, that we assist in that regard. Where there's a shortfall, we don't look at that as double dipping. Double dipping is you getting the full scale of exactly what you need to get, but going again to somebody else to try and get the same thing. Now that is a problem, and for the same expenditure items. So in this case, where there is a shortfall, because what that naturally means is that there's an expenditure item that has not been catered for. In the context of the industrial parks, that is where we are saying we're working very closely with DBSA and also with SASRIA to make sure that those are catered for. And then I've already responded to the issue of the implication of this to the master plans and the work with the different spheres of government. I think the CEO has already touched on. I've touched on the issue of the allocation of funds, where those funds are going to go to. But Chair, you did raise the issue of what it then means when an NEF is looking, say, at inquiries of about 900 million, but the allocation that had gone to them is less than that. What we have done, we have already transmitted to IDC and NEF sum of 500 million. And I think as part of ensuring that this money does not sit in anybody's bank account and interest, but it goes to the enterprises where it is it's directed, we are working on a system where, as the money is required, we will then release the money. We don't want to do or manage a program where eventually there will be money sitting in any of our institutions and companies are still in need, and we don't have the flexibility to redirect those funds. That is why we have opted to wait until the DFIs give us the reports, they give us the assurance that the money has been spent, and then based on that we replenish the funds, and we make sure that we are agreed even on some of the process improvements that the department has instructed that the DFIs put in place, and we also make sure that the manner in which the funding is dispersed as part of our agreement with the DFIs. All of those things are in place. So that would be our response to that. Then there was the question on the 3 to 5 months, and this the response that we got on the survey. As I had indicated, we did that survey about the 18th of July. It was that's when we opened that survey. It was still fairly raw. Companies were still looking and trying to assess what this means for them. It's a survey, so it's a snapshot at a point in time. What we are doing now is going back to those same companies to try and see whether that assessment still holds, and to see how many of those have come back into full production. Hence, you would have seen in that slide with Invest SA, where we've highlighted some of those companies that are coming back into full stream. So we do fully expect that for some of the companies, it might take longer than the 5 months that they had initially thought it would take, but for some, it may even take shorter than what they initially thought. There are other companies that are thinking about other innovative ways where, even if it means they temporarily may not produce, but their work and workforce is then allowed to produce in the site of another company. All of those things are what companies are looking at in order to get back into production as quick as possible to service the orders that they need to service. I think the CEO has dealt with this issue about the ownership of companies and whether that ownership will then determine the eligibility for support. That for us, if it is a South African registered company, that is what it is. It's we don't go further to say who owns it. We look at a South African registered company. We look at its standing. We look at its observance of the laws that are applicable. All of those things are what then becomes important in the assessment. The role of the private sector. Yes, there are a number of companies that have approached us, as the CEO had said before he left, about the fact that they are going to continue discussions with BASA. We already had engagements with some of the banks who were looking at supporting particularly the informal sector. We're still in the process of finalizing that discussions. We're waiting on them to finalize their own proposal and cost their own proposal, so that we will be able to know how much we need to set aside for that. But we've in principle given a green light to that work, pending, of course, them coming back to us and giving us an indication of what exactly are they putting on the table. One of the other things we need to be very careful of is to keep on adding administrative costs to funding that must flow to enterprises. So if it's financiers, there must be value add that they bring, not just saying, no, government must give us the money and then we charge them an admin fee and then we on land or we do something else. We have to get as close as possible to our target client in a cost-effective manner. That is why we've asked this one particular bank that they must put on the table what it is that they're setting aside, and our commitment to them is that based on the proposition, we may also be able to match them. On the other issues relating to businesses outside the different provinces, I think that we have dealt with. The roles of the bank we've dealt with. I'm not sure if there's some here that I have missed, but I would just like to ask Stephen, I'm hoping that he's still on the call, if there's anything, Stephen, that I've missed for the DTIC, if you could quickly come in.
Thanks, DG, and thanks, Honourable Chair and Honourable members. Perhaps just very briefly on two issues. As DG indicated, the unrest affected essentially 2 weeks of the first month of what will be Q3 of the calendar year. And of course, it only affected businesses in primarily, but not exclusively, 2 provinces. So I think the general consensus amongst economists is that we're probably likely to see somewhere between a 0.3, 0.4 to maybe a 0.7% percentage points reduction in GDP. That doesn't mean that the economy will be in recession. It simply means that whereas at the moment the South African Reserve Bank thinks we'll grow by about 4.2% this year, perhaps we'll only grow by about 3.5 or 3.8%. But that is still a very strong growth rate compared to the last few years. So it's likely to slow economic growth a little bit rather than have a major impact on GDP. And then, Honourable Chair, if I can maybe just add on the citrus issue, we have in fact been in touch with the citrus sector along with our colleagues in the Department of Agriculture, as well as with the Agricultural Business Chamber. And the best information we have at the moment is that it's likely that the citrus season will be the best season on record, and is likely to beat last year's export tally of about $10.2 billion worth of citrus exports. I think we were somewhat fortunate that the unrest took place well into the citrus season. So a lot of the citrus exports were already out of the country. Then of course the unrest did slow port operations, and the cyber attack on Transnet similarly slowed port operations, but the industry was able to respond quite quickly and was able to delay delivery of some of those export containers to the port. And that took place over about a week or so. And the best information we have at the moment, which is from about a week ago, is that the Agricultural Business Chamber is still of the view that we'll set a new record for citrus exports this year. And so the delays have been caught up, and the costs have also been mitigated to some extent. So, Chairperson, just those 2 additions from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stephen Hanifa. I don't know, DG, if there are any other additions from other members of management.
Yes, maybe the CEO of NEF, if she should also like to answer some of the questions that were put to us. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay. Now I was going to go back to the CEO, but I wanted to check maybe from the department if there are any others. So let's go then to CEO of NEF.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. And thank you, DG. I thought the Honourable Chair had forgotten about me.
No. I wanted to first deal with the department and then come back to the entities. I was going to go back to the IDC and then the way you were reporting.
Yes, yes. No, I'm joking.
I haven't forgotten about you. I'll never do that.
Thank you, Chair. So I would like to answer the question that was raised by Honourable Boshoff. So she wanted to find out about the package that we offer to the enterprises that were affected by the riots. She wanted to find out if this is user-friendly, if they can actually follow most of the things that are contained in that package. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, so the package is actually it's a simplified version of our investment processes. It actually contains the application forms, not the very long detailed application forms, because honorable members will remember that these are businesses that were fully operational. So it's not like we are starting a new business from scratch. So we look at the funding criteria. So we'll supply them with the funding criteria. We look at the checklist of all the information required for us to package the deals. So it could be the lease, agreements, it could be the detailed breakdown of funding that is actually required. So now that the NEF employees, as I mentioned earlier, are interacting physically with the various enterprises that are affected. So they are able to sit down with them and even assist them to actually complete the forms. So that's what has been really, really pleasing about this initiative that the NEF has been involved in. So they sit with them, they supply them with the forms. They will tell them that if let's say you lost the machinery and equipment during the riots, they will even go to the suppliers of those particular products, especially the machinery and equipment, to actually negotiate on their behalf. So this has been really, really useful, Chairperson, because the enterprises that were affected, some of the people we have engaged with are really, really traumatized. It's not just the assets and the companies that we are looking at, but even the people who are affected now are really, really traumatized. So the physical contact with them has really helped. So, and Honorable Member Boshoff asked again another question. So what happens if they are not able to increase the number of jobs? What happens if, for instance, they come back and say they are no longer able to take those businesses forward? So we have a unit within the NEF that is called the workout and turnaround units. So it's a unit that has been there for many, many years. So once we have approved these transactions, so if, for instance, it's just a normal, working business environment and the business is actually doing well, so that business will go to our post-investment division. So that's where they will get all the advisory support post the investment that we would have made in that particular business. So if for whatever reason, then the business will start experiencing some financial distress or financial difficulty, then it will go to our turnaround. So the turnaround strategists will be working very closely with these businesses, but also, Chairperson, we have a well-established mentorship support that we have in all the 9 provinces in the country. So we have mentors who are trained. So these are retired, executives, managers who have worked within the tourism sector, within the retail sector. So they would say they still want to actually add value to what we're trying to do. So it doesn't matter whether those mentors are black or white, for as long as they are willing to go in there and provide support to our SMMEs and the companies that are supported by the NEF. So that's what we will be doing, Chairperson. We have a well-established post-investment support. On the red tape, I think this question has been answered, but there was an honorable member who wanted to find out, so what happens if a company has lost all their IT systems, all their financial records during the riots? Our teams have been going there also, Chair, to try and reconstruct the financials starting from scratch, because for as long as those companies can still access some of the records from the financial institutions. So we've been going to the financial institutions to say, Can you please supply us with the financial records, the bank statements of the following companies? So we are reconstructing some of those financial, information and financial records from scratch, working in partnership with the affected businesses. And then Honorable Meimang, I hope I'm pronouncing his surname correctly. Pardon me if I haven't, but I tried. So Honorable Meimang was talking about the attacks that happened, on the malls and the townships. So what are the profiles of the property developers and the property owners that we're referring to? So Honorable Meimang, in fact, you made reference to two malls in Gauteng. You referred to the Orange Farm Mall and then another one in Soweto. So we know the property owners of the Protea Glen and Dobsonville malls. It's people, as I said earlier, that the NEF has already invested in this sector in the past. So these are individuals that we have worked with in the past. Like most of the malls around Soweto are owned by the Masingita Group. It's a Black-owned company. So well experienced with a lot of managers and executives, and obviously the owners who understand this sector in and out. They have really an in-depth understanding of the sector. But what is pleasing for us, because these malls, they happen to be in our townships, the malls, these properties are actually owned by Black companies. So that's what is really pleasing. The Orange Farm was funded by the NEF, Honorable Meimang. So I even know the shareholding structure of this company. The community actually has a stake in the Orange Farm Mall, and that stake was acquired, an equity stake there was acquired with the funding that the community had actually raised from the NEF. So the NEF has been involved with that property development, but we also wanted to ensure that once we had invested on behalf of the community, that we will protect the interest of the community, because sometimes you'll find that the community doesn't, or they are not so fair with most of these, transactions or investments that they would be involved in. So we've been working very, very well with the community that is actually based in Orange Farm. So it would be great, Honorable Person, in fact, for all the other property development initiatives that we're going to be looking at in the future, to come up with a similar model, because this has really worked. If you look at the Umlazi mega city, that one also, which happens to be the largest, mall or property development in Umlazi. It's Umlazi. It was also funded by the NEF, and the community has a stake there. So I'm just saying it's one of the shareholding or ownership models that we can actually consider going forward. And then Honorable Tim wanted to find out whether the packages that we're offering, if they are discriminating against any other groups in South Africa. So as I mentioned, Chairperson, our mandate is to support Black-owned enterprises. So if our honorable members can change the legislation and say the NEF can now fund white-owned businesses, we will gladly do that. But for now, our mandate focuses exclusively on the provision of a financial and non-financial support to Black-owned enterprises. However, all the other DFIs in South Africa, their mandate allows them to fund across all the various racial groups in South Africa. But if we happen to have a white-owned business that also wanted to access our funding, not just this funding package that we're looking at, any of our funding packages that we've put in place in the past, if they are willing to transform, if they are willing to actually sell an equity stake to a Black-owned company, if they want to work in partnership with Black-owned companies, or actually form joint venture partnerships with Black-owned companies, we would be more than happy to support them. And unfortunately, at this stage, even for foreign nationals, they have to comply with all the relevant laws of the country, and we will only be able to support or work with them if they partner with Black-owned companies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I see Honorable Boshoff has a follow-up question. Can I check if other honorable members have a follow-up question? I think you are the only one, Honorable Boshoff. Can you take the platform, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. I hear what the gentleman said with regard to the best vintage year regarding our citrus. But I would like to know what interaction has DTIC had with Transnet to ensure that the systems are not again hacked and that exports are not able to take place, because the citrus industry did lose a lot because many of the products remained in the ports and everywhere because it couldn't be exported due to the hacking of the Transnet system. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Boshoff. DG and Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I think on that matter,
Sorry, DG. Just before you respond, I see there's a hand of Honorable Dango. Perhaps if you can respond to both the Honorable Boshoff and Honorable Dango. Honorable Dango, can you please go ahead?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairperson. I just wanted to know, when they speak about the international companies and partners, are they looking at sovereign wealth funds outside the country as well to get investments from? Because I think some of the interest rates may be better than normal commercial interest rates. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Dango. Honorable DG.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'll start with the question from Honorable Boshoff and take it in the order that the questions were put to us. On the Transnet matter, of course, we've been following it quite closely. We are quite concerned that this is happening, and we are mindful that this is again a reality that institutions across the world have to contend with this issue of hacking. Transnet did try in as quick as the time to get the systems up and running, but I wouldn't want to make a commitment on their behalf, Honorable Boshoff. But what we take comfort from is that they do now have in place systems, and maybe they would then be better placed to come and explain in detail to the committee exactly the systems that they have now put in place and the measures that they've put in place. But I'm sure members know that this has happened to a number of countries with devastating outcomes. Some of them much more richer than we are, much more developed than we are, hacking of electric grids and all of those things. And this is I think the challenge of the world that we are living in now. And what I would say about that is that for us, we've been working with the companies that were affected, raising the issues where it needed to be raised with Transnet. They seem to now have the issue under control, but they would be best placed to come and give Parliament that assurance the exact systems and their turnaround and recovery strategy. Honorable Dango raises an interesting matter. We have been we've been dealing with investors, the brick and mortar people, in the context of the DTI, but National Treasury itself has had to do a reach out, I think across government, all the departments based on the different stakeholders that we ordinarily would deal with. We all had to give the different levels of assurances. For the DTIC, it wasn't the money people and the paper money people, it was the brick and mortar people, the manufacturers in the main, that we had to deal with. But as I'd indicated, that I'm sure with the National Treasury, they would have had to also be dealing with the international community within their mandate. Chair, those would be our responses for now. Also thanking the members for the questions that the members have put to us, making a commitment to the honorable members of us putting our strength to make sure that this recovery happens. And as we indicated, we are building back better. And as we are required to do, we continue to be available to members to come and account. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Perhaps Honorable Boshoff, when she spoke about Transnet, she reminded me of a term that Transnet triggered, which is called the force majeure. I just want to find out with regard to the entities of department, maybe the CEO of NEF could respond also to this. Unfortunately, the CEO of ITC is not with us now. If there are businesses that had loans from the entities, but now because of the situation in KZN and Gauteng, are unable to meet their obligation, could they also trigger this force majeure? Can I just get a response to that? I'm reminded by Honorable Boshoff, otherwise I was not going to make a follow-up question.
Maybe, Chair, let me talk about how we have responded to those entities. As I said earlier, that we have provided interest rate holidays, moratoriums to those entities. So maybe ours will not be exactly the same force majeure that was applied by Transnet, but we have actually catered for those companies by actually applying those financing arrangements that I've referred to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think the DG has already made concluding remarks. I'll also thank the DG, the CEO of NEF, CEO of IDC for the presentation. It was a very long, comprehensive presentation with a lot of information that has assisted us. It's a pity that we only got it today, but it's information that we'll continue to engage with. Thank you very much for attending the meeting and giving us the presentation of information. Thank you very much. Honorable members, already it's after 8. We have 2 sets of minutes. I want to suggest that we defer them to the next meeting, which will take place next Tuesday, if we agree.
Agreed, Chair.
It's
Thank you very
Honourable
much.
Mofokeng.
Thank you very much, honorable members. That then take us to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance and participation. The meeting is adjourned. Good night.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Honorable.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very
Chair. Good night.
Good night. Good night, Kenny.
Recording stopped.